is counterproductive to the process.
And giving you all this work in a part of your brain that basically is switched off for birth, which is constantly people are asking you questions. If you reach the hospital, they'll ask you questions. They'll ask you how you're feeling. They'll check you. And then the formality of filling the paperwork and the rest of it. And then you're constantly being drawn to engage with a part of your brain, which is basically, again, not
required,
right? And so
this is the Birth Agni podcast, the fire that brings us alive, that burns myths and opens a channel of authentic natural birth stories. This show debunks the many myths of the medicalized births, showcases the plethora of choices a pregnant couple can make to embark on their empowered birth journey. I'm Divya Kapoor, a certified birth and lactation counselor and an aspiring traditional birth attendant. Let's get the flames blazing high. Ariel emailed me in August. It was right after a birth I had attended, which was intercity, so I'd come back home. And this heartwarming email broke me down in tears. It was so wonderful to see that all the stories we've collected have helped people. So here's her email, and she's the one who volunteered to bring her story on the podcast. And we're so excited to have her and her husband's journey of birth and postpartum in this 3-part series. So I'll read the email out to you. Hello Divya, I'm writing to you as I want to thank you for all the stories you've collected on your podcast. I've been listening to them throughout my pregnancy and now after birth too. It's been such a great resource for me in addition to many other listening, collecting information I have done as many who elect a home birth. I wanted to volunteer my home birth story, which was magical. My baby was born March 2024, completely unmedicated and extremely peaceful. I'm an Indian woman who had my first baby at 38 years old and did so at home. There is so much research I did, and I want my story to be a source of inspiration to someone who really needs it. I would love an opportunity to pay it forward somehow for all the listening I did. I feel I've walked out of this experience feeling empowered and listened to, which was the best part of this whole experience. I love your format and want to volunteer my story. So here we are. Today is part 1 with Ariel and Nitin, where they share how they arrived at the decision of a home birth and what was the journey like, the speculation, the inner journey, the coming together of both of them for this experience at home. And what was the work? What all did it take to come to the final decision of birthing at home? So that's about part 1. Part 2 is about their experience of labor and birth. Part 3 is about postpartum, which is so important to cover and understand how it can feel absolutely different with every story. So here we go with part 1. If you have been an avid listener of this podcast and really like it, please consider giving this a rating or review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcast. Also consider giving this a donation. You can buy me a coffee or just make a small donation to cover the charges. You can do so by finding the link in the show notes, or you can also go to my website. On the page where you get the podcast, you will find the links. There is one for the Indian audience to make it easier for them to pay, and there's one for the international audience. Thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, hi Nitin.
Hi Divya, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. How about you?
Very good. Thank you.
Nitin, we spoke to you last time about how did you feel when Ariel decided to have, Ariel was very inclined to have a home birth, and you kind of had your own questions and your own understanding. And coming from where we come from, we have a very heavily relied upon idea that, when it comes to birth, it has to go to a system. You go to a doctor and then you have your baby in the hospital. So when all that was working around you, you guys were arriving at the decision of a home birth, how did you feel at different maybe steps of the journey, and what helped you arrive at the idea of a home birth?
Yeah, so interestingly, like 10 years ago, Ariel had brought up the idea of home birth. She had shown me some pictures of birthing, in a pool of water. So it wasn't a completely foreign concept. It just seemed very distant and something that we may not do. But I thought it was cool when she had shown that to me. So 10 years later, when we were in the situation and she started talking about more seriously about home birth, I felt a combination of excitement that we are doing something different. It's there is like a touch of adventure to it, but I also felt fearful of the unknowns. In my mind, the hospital is a safe environment. You have a doctor, you have equipment, that was my perspective. So that was running in my head. So like, is it safe? Will she be safe if she needs help? How soon can we get there? In my mind, I was trying to work on a plan A, plan B, plan C kind of a thing. Although, I wasn't telling her all that, but I was kind of, thinking all those things inside my head. And I also had another concern that if she chose to go fully unmedicated, like in a home birth, can she handle that kind of pain? Because knowing Ariel, I didn't think she was a person who had that, tolerance for that kind of pain. That's something I, saw only when I witnessed it. I realized what she was capable of. But so in my mind, to birth in the hospital was a safer place because you have access to like doctors and equipment and technology. And I was concerned, like, what if there was an emergency, and what would we do? And in my mind, again, I was trying to come up with a plan A, plan B, plan C. Okay, plan A is our trying a home birth, but if not, because home birth also has its own criteria, like they only do it within a certain window. There are certain markers, and I was already planning for like multiple things, and my last concern was if she could handle a fully unmedicated birth, where the pain that comes with it. I thought Ariel was a person who did not have a very high tolerance for pain, but it's something I found out later that she could withstand all that pain. So yeah, so it was, to summarize, I would say there was excitement, but there was also a lot of like fear of the unknowns, and I was trying to process it. I was fully on board, like I knew that we were doing it. Both Ariel and I, we have done a lot of things. We've been together for like 20 years. We've done, a lot of adventurous things in our lives. So yeah, I was fully on board, but my mind was calculating like many different possibilities.
Yeah. So how did you guys decide on a midwife? Like, what was that like? What did your search look like? And where did it begin?
Yeah, it was all done by Ariel. I didn't have a big role to play there. So she was just doing a lot of searches, like in the area where we live. So we live in San Jose, and she was looking at within like a 5-mile radius. She was trying to find, look at reviews and stuff. And she found our midwife, Hope Williams, who had like a lot of good reviews. And she's just like within like a mile or 2 miles away from our home. Her office is like 2 miles, and I think she lives like less than 5 minutes away from where we were. So she had good reviews, and I think it was pretty clear, and we just made an appointment to go and meet with her.
Yeah, and when you met with her the first time, and you must have already gone to the hospital a couple of times, maybe before that, if I'm like kind of assuming it right. How did that care and how did that meeting seem to you, and what did it do to you and your concerns? Of course, you might have had questions even then. How did that meeting, or the meetings thereafter when you had with her, how did they help you slowly turn around, maybe with far more confidence? Yeah.
So the interesting thing is we never went to a hospital. We never saw a doctor. So the midwife was the only person that we met. So I have nothing to compare against from our own experience, but I know from our friends that we have spoken how a hospital appointment is very time bound. The OBGYN sees you for a brief period of time. There are some few quick questions. Sometimes it's personal, sometimes it's not very personal. So I have nothing to compare. I can just speak about, how I experienced it. I think working with Hope was very personal. It was a totally different experience. It was long appointments, where a lot of questions around how you're feeling, what's going on, how's your day, what are you eating. It was a sit down in the couch, and it was like a very, very long kind of thing. Sometimes I would get bored. I attended every appointment except one because I was traveling to India to meet with my parents. I missed one of them. but I attended every one of them, and she would also talk to me. Most of the conversation was with Ariel, but I also sometimes, chimed in and asked a couple of questions. And
did you, when it came to emergencies, that must have been a part that you must have discussed with Hope. How did she kind of answer that for you? How did she explain the safety of home births and plan A, plan B?
Yeah, so she's done this so many times. So it wasn't new, me asking these questions. And she said that 95% of the times, like she gave some statistics of when it has become like a hospital birth where they had to rush to a hospital. And that was almost like, I think more than like 1 out of 10, or even less than that, maybe 1 in 20 cases where they had to go to a hospital. So she was kind of assuring me, and she was very calm and cool about it, because they do it like very often. And she was trying to understand. And Hope is a very, I would say she's a very empathetic, very warm person. I've never met, she's a very unique person. I've not come across somebody like her in my life before. And she tried to ask me, so what are your anxieties? Like, what are you worried about? So it even came up in one of our conversations, where I said that I was born 1 month premature. So which wasn't in the 37, 38 week window that, she had. And what if that happens? And then, she spoke to me. She was almost like a therapist talking to me about, so what happened? Tell me about the story of, how your birth. So I actually went back to my mom trying to find out, like, what it was. My mom told the story of, like, how it happened like a month before, and they had to like rush her. They went in an auto and went to the hospital. That whole story. And I was born, and then they had to like take me away from her and keep me away for some time. And, because I was premature. And Hope spoke to me about all those things, and I was talking. It was very emotional for me as well, like talking about those things. And she even brought up things about what happens when babies are born premature. Like she spoke about attachment disorders. And so it was like, it took me in some of the journey itself. So she had a very therapist kind of an approach while talking. She was very calm. She was open to any different possibilities. But from her experience, she thought, Ariel's perfectly healthy. Everything looks good. So, we have nothing to worry about. And I even told her that, I want to go and look at the hospital where it is. Like, and she gave us, like, if something happened where we had to go to a hospital, she told us which were the hospitals, the best ones that we would go to. And she would accompany us. She'd be our midwife. She'd go with us. And that was all. Those were the things that, she had spoken to us about. We also hired her assistant. Her assistant, the midwife's assistant, was our doula, was our birth doula. So it was like a team that we had formed. We wanted to keep the team small. We didn't want like another doula, another assistant, and too many people to be there. So she told us about the hospital. So Ariel and I, one thing we did is we just drove to that hospital, found out where the reception is, and what it looks like, where we would park, if we had to like go there. So she really calmed me on this whole thing, and she made me talk about it. I would say she asked, like, what are you worried about? What are the concerns? And I spoke to her, and in the end, it was like I felt like, if something happens, then she's also with us, and she'll advocate for us if we went to the hospital, and try so that we try and give us the best advice, and try and follow something as close to our birth plan as Ariel had put together.
Yeah, lovely. And so when labor began, right, when the day arrived that, you were going to have the baby, how did that entire experience look like for you? And now that you think of this in hindsight, how does it seem to have impacted you as a person for life?
Yeah, so we had, so Melanie was our doula, the Hope's assistant, and Hope was a midwife. So we had the doula come before. That's what Melanie, the midwife had instructed. The assistant and our doula would come before. So she came in. She came in on Saturday night. It was pretty late, actually. It was probably, she had kept her phone on standby. At 2:00, we started feeling like these frequent contractions, and so we called her. So she came in first. And they were, so maybe rewinding a little bit, the last few appointments were in our home. So every 2 weeks they met with us. So they were like, we had developed a level of comfort with them because they'd come to our home. They had told us like what we need to do, where the supplies were, and even in the kitchen, like, if they wanted to go and pick something, so we had brought snacks for them. So there was like a level of comfort, and the way, and every time, when they met with us, they would like give us a warm hug. It was a, very, very personable kind of an approach. Initially, I found this was like too good to be true. Like, why are these people, so friendly? And so I didn't, and then I realized that they are like generally very happy and, warm people. They do this, they enjoy, they love so much what they do that they really connect with people. So Melanie came home and she was trying to help, Ariel through the whole thing. And Ariel was going through a lot of pain and, contractions. And then Hope, she came in like, I think towards the morning at around 6-ish. They were both dressed in like, workout clothes, and they were the way they came with their bags, and it's like, you could tell they were pros, like they've done this like, a couple of 100 times or something like that. So yeah, it was very comfortable. I fully trusted them. We had the relationship by that point. We had known them for like a period of 6 months or so. And the relation, I fully trusted them. If anything were to happen, they would give us the right kind of advice. So I had fully like surrendered to their care at that point.
Yeah. And how did so in your memory, what would be the important points during labor that you would like to bring at this point for fathers to learn and hear about, so they feel more comfortable with the idea of whatever they choose, for birth, and even if they are kind of supporting birth in a birth center or a hospital at home, labor and birth, we haven't seen it. And we've been very detached, especially men have been very detached culturally over these years. So what would you say to fathers out there?
Yeah, before describing the experience of the birth, I want to just touch upon the thing that Ariel and I went through a lot of like online training materials on birthing, not necessarily home birthing, but on birthing. So I think I had a certain level of education and knew what to expect, at least theoretically, based on all these all the training materials. So I was prepared, and I really wanted to be a part of it. So I came from that place. Apparently, for certain people, it's traumatic to see that, so they choose not to be a part of that. For me, it was totally the opposite. I wanted to be fully a part of it. I wanted to be holding her. I wanted to be the first guy to catch the baby, and all of those things. So I even we went through material like, what if the baby came out before the midwife arrived? So I was even prepared for things like that. So I was very prepared, and if my advice to any father to be, if they want to be a part of it, like the preparation is key. The more you read about it, the more training you take, the better prepared you're going to be. It was and to describe the experience itself, from the start of labor till the delivery, it was a very emotional time as well. I went through a lot of like ups and downs. It was to see Ariel in pain during sometimes was like really, really hard. And because of the lip thing, it prolonged a few hours. It could have happened sooner, but the whole thing prolonged for like a couple of hours, and that part was really painful for me to see her in pain. I felt extremely helpless. I didn't know what to do. There was nothing I could do. I was trying to like hold her and comfort her, but it simply wasn't enough. We have a small dog, and he was waiting, and he wanted to go out to relieve himself, and I couldn't go out because I thought I want to be here. And then I spoke to the midwife. She said, yeah, it's okay, you can just step out for some time. So I went out, and it was so emotional for me because I was trying to process that this is so painful. Like, why the hell are we doing this? Like, I started questioning everything. Like, why does anybody have to go through like so much of pain? And our dog, he wasn't, doing his business, and I was getting like upset with him terribly. So, hey, do it. I normally never would do that to him because he's such a gentle soul. And because I wanted to be back, and I was in between, I started like, texting and finding out how she was doing. And finally, I got him to do what he had to do, and I pulled and came back. And I do remember, like, when I stepped out at that time, as I processed these things, like, I had like tears, and there was so many emotions of why this is happening, and why is this so hard? Like, couldn't it be simple? Because those couple of hours, I think I saw Ariel in like tremendous amount of pain, where she didn't know what to do, and she was even asking me, should we just abandon all this and just go to the hospital? We spoke to Hope about it. Hope said that you're at a point, even if you went there, they wouldn't do anything different than because you're so well into your labor now, and they would just do some kind of an intervention, which it's something we could do here. So it's kind of pointless to go there. I think you just have to wait, and you're going to be fine. And we trusted Hope so much. If she said that, she said that. We totally trusted. That was built over the period of the few months leading up to this point. So yeah. So my advice would be, prepare as much as you can, be educated about it. Think of, again, it's good to think of plan ABC. Be okay with feeding helpless. I think it's perfectly fine. It is, nature has to take its course here. And there is nothing you can do. You just have to be there, be supportive. I think there are times where like Ariel was like a little bit annoyed. She didn't want me near her, or like, she wasn't responding to me, but I continued to like hold her hand, or, just be around her and, try and be of help, the best help that I can. So, yeah.
No, I completely understand when you think of someone else who's just observing, witnessing birth, and when you haven't seen women going from the intensity to the relief after birth, all of that might feel like it's I don't know when it's going to end. Like, when are we going to reach the shore? And I can't even imagine to see your loved one in that state, because women do absolutely look very different when they are in labor than right after when they've given birth. All of their demeanor and the way they look, the way they're spirited completely changes. The point that prepare is so important, and that's something that I think in India we are lacking at a very big scale, because we think that the doctors and whoever we are hiring is gonna prepare us for labor and birth, but what we don't realize that it's an internal journey. It has been an internal journey for you in so many ways, Nitin, and it is an internal journey for the woman herself, because she is feeling it in her body, in her soul, in her spirit, and preparation along with surrender to what it may look like. Cervical lip is what you were trying to speak of. That cervical lip kind of made it very painful. And yes, whenever there's a bit of a cervix that's a little swollen at one end and needs to go back to allow the baby to come, and without which it will be quicker, actually does make it far more painful. And then again, it's a journey of it's a story we were supposed to weave, and it's a story which was supposed to make us more powerful, more empowered in the real sense after the fact. And I'm so grateful that you've shared your version of how it kind of it has impacted you, and it has made you the person you are today. And I do say that, yeah.
I did feel at one point that I could take some of that pain. Like, I wish there was a way where I could take half of that pain. So it was a very helpless moment in that short window. I felt really helpless. I felt very sad that she had to go through that pain during that time. Like, I questioned maybe this was not required at all. For a moment I felt that after the baby came out, everything changed, and Ariel didn't even remember any of those moments that seemed like forever in my head. She has such low memory of that whole thing. Like, that's like erased from her memory or something. And our preparation is, one was the birth, but Ariel and I have known each other for a long time. And there was so much we were doing in preparation to get here. Like, we had gone through like couples counseling and like, a lot of things like that. There was a journey where we were going through our own therapies to kind of, and the last 2 weeks leading to the birth, that was like a very emotional period for me in many, many different ways. I have been reading, a lot of psychology, and I was trying to heal myself of my own, a lot of childhood things, like leading up to it. Like I was feeling a pressure that, I'm going to have a daughter, I'm going to be a dad, I need to be the best person that I can. I cannot, so I was under that kind of a pressure. I remember on the day, like on that Saturday night when we were expecting the baby, I gathered a lot of things. Like I did like a clean of a lot of my belongings, things that I didn't need. I went and, I drove, I gave away my clothes. Like I was doing, I don't know what I was doing. I was trying to clear myself. So there was so much going on inside our heads, during that time. So there was like a preparation at like multiple levels for, what was coming next in our lives.
That's the nesting urge that we know of birds that have the nesting urge, and of course of human beings, but we don't get to hear that a lot.
Yeah.
So that kind of makes me feel, fathers go through nesting urge, and that's wonderful to know and hear. And it's incredible, the amount of how we are run by our intuition, how we are run by something that just calls to us, and we do not know what we're doing. Like you're saying, I did not know why I was kind of cleaning and getting rid of things, and internally kind of cleaning up and preparing space, making space for another soul in your life. And I love the fact that when you have gone, you've kind of opened up this entire episode of how you felt during when you were trying to help her, and it wasn't working, and the fact that she doesn't have much memory about it. And the beauty about birth is that for a spectator, it's so incredibly, like it's a giant animal, right? It's a big wild animal. But for the mom, the brain is incredible in the way the hormones are incredible, the cocktail is incredible, that it kind of makes you feel, it archives the pain of the contraction before as the next one comes. It prepares you for the next one, the muscle memory, but it archives the pain of the last one. And the painkillers simply increase with time. So women are tipsy, women are surreal, women are not on this plane itself, like the plane that you and I are talking on. They are at an elevated plane at that time, and which is why it is not designed to be a suffering. For women, it's a portal. It's an entry into motherhood from maidenhood, and the hard work before that kind of prepares us for the new life, because that is also, like, parenthood is not easy, and it's never going to be easy, I suppose. As my daughter is growing up, I think I'm going to have to deal with a lot of more powerful stuff than the mundane, trying to take care of her and trying to adjust her into my routine. And now it's way more, it's another human being just unfolding, showing a different part of a different, So I'm so grateful to you, Nitin, to come across and, to sit with us and speak about your journey. And do you want to add something to it before we call Ariel on?
Yeah, I think describing all that was happening there, like, all those tense moments that I was going through. And when the baby, so there was one moment when they knew, both, Hope, the midwife, and the assistant and our doula knew that it's going to happen. And they were communicating without talking. Like, that was one, because they do this together all the time. And after that, it led up to that, and the baby came out. So I did get a chance, like I was with the midwife catching, I was like, my hands were like right next. So I was able to like hold the baby for the first time. And it was a very, very surreal moment. It was very surreal. Like, we thought that there is a baby inside, but like now the baby is in our hands. It was like very, very surreal. And it was, again, it was very, very magical in terms of the experience that we had with Hope and with our midwife and the doula. It was a lot of emotions when the baby particularly came out. By then it was a huge relief, but it was a life-changing event. It was a life-changing moment as well. And the way we did it, like having done this at home, I don't think we would have ever felt like a fraction of this if this happened in a hospital. So this was in our home with our dog, in our, like, we had set up our entire home with like lights and, cards, and made the whole place like very, very cozy with the birth pool and everything. So it was very, very magical, very, very special. That experience is, I can't even describe. I videoed the whole thing. I wanted to remember this. So I videoed, and also our doula also took like so many videos of it. So we wanted to have, keep this as a memory for the future.
Yeah. They just show you around the placenta and how it has been nurturing the baby, and that seeing the placenta that we've known for all this while, that there is an organ called placenta, but then to see it for real and to see how the baby was being nurtured by it and the cord and everything. How did that feel like?
Yeah, she did. She called it like a tour of. They call it like the tree of life. So she did a full demonstration of the placenta, of like everything, and it was all very. It was such a unique experience. Like,
did you bury the placenta somewhere?
No, we actually, what we did is we converted that into like a powder, like
encapsulated it.
Yeah, encapsulated it. That's the word I was looking for. So we encapsulated it. That was also recommended by our midwife, saying that the mom could actually, it's a source of some of the hormones, if she went through certain hormonal imbalances. So we took that advice and we encapsulated the placenta.
Lovely. Love that. And animals do consume their placenta, and it's for the very reason, to kind of nourish the soul. And so lovely. And once again, Nitin, thank you so much.
Thank you, Divya. It's been a pleasure to share with you this whole magical experience as well.
Yeah, lovely to hear that, and to kind of go back to that journey with you while you were narrating it. I could completely feel, the space, and I could imagine you too. And thank you so much. We'll now have Ariel on, and we'll have her describe.
Yeah.
And if you two could be together for a few seconds, I would love that.
We can. Let's see how the baby is doing. Maybe the baby will also join us. It depends on what she's doing. And let's see. Let me check what's going on. So I'm gonna go find her.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Hello. Yes, welcome to you before we welcome your mom. So hi, Ariel. It's good to have you. We were just speaking with Nitin about how the part of the birth that he remembered the most was hazy for you, and like you were just describing that she's growing fast, and it's a roller coaster ride. So all of it becomes hazy after. So we were speaking to Nitin, and we spoke at length about how did you arrive at the decision of a home birth, and he spoke about from the time that he had his questions, and you were kind of already becoming very convinced, and you guys had been you had already, like, far back, like a decade back, you had seen videos of water births, etc., if I understood completely, and you anyway had a sense of it being more gentle, being a very different experience than the conventional. So how did your journey, Ariel, when you began the work with the midwife, before that look like, and how did you prepare for everything? Yeah.
Firstly, I just want to thank you so much for putting up all of the stories of the multiple people, Divya. I have listened to many podcasts, including yours, through my own pregnancy and in prep for it. And I think the stories that people had was so vividly different that it left me in a place none other than feeling empowered to, really explore my options fully and feel very confident about it. So I just want to thank you about it, about putting all of this together. It's a lot of work, and you have a lot of passion for what you're doing, and it's a huge, what can I say? It's a huge gift you have to be able to support women and the community of women the way that you do. So really, my gratitude to you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, you've kind of made me overwhelmed with love. And I would say I do like it. And I would also like to thank you for reaching out to me and sharing how the stories helped you and how you wanted to contribute to the podcast to help many more women see through what you experienced in the and the beauty of life and how non-linear it is and yet beautiful. And so thank you so much. Like I said, you've been leading this, so
it starts with stories, and my story of actually being on the receiving end of hearing about birth as a young girl growing up was very unpleasant. The fact that it's very painful and it can be traumatic, and everything that you saw in media or movies or anywhere was pretty scary actually, but also very helpless in the way that it was depicted, right? However, as I spoke with family members, I think my grandmother's had all of her 9 births at home. Their accounts were probably very, very dramatically different to the actual, depiction of it via media and movies. And so it all starts with stories. And so again, I can't thank everyone that kind of, has contributed to sort of the positive stories to help other people make an informed decision for themselves. For me, my story really started with a lot of fear of the unknown and really exploring myself as a human being and what I want from my pregnancy, pre-pregnancy time, pregnancy, as well as birth. And so birth is just one aspect of the different facets of you entering into parenthood or motherhood, if you like it. And so it was really an exploration into myself that started all of this. And so years ago, I knew that I had a lot of fear, the fear about being in a helpless situation, right? And so that wasn't something that really sat well with me. So long story short, I think as I dug deeper, I think answering a couple of questions, became very important to me. And look, I've done a lot of research around all of the options available, right? There's a ton of options that are available to women these days. I think there's just a lot of misinformation, about the fact that you go in and everyone's going to take care of you, right? That might be true in some cases, but it's not true in most cases, is what I learned through my research. And so, I don't know, just knowing sort of C-section rates in different hospitals and, why that happens, understanding the process of physiological birth and how your hormones play a huge part in that. And really, birth is more, I'd probably say, 85 to 90% mental than it is physical. Yes, there's some physical discomfort, but if you can just put your mind at ease, and look, we live in a age of information today. Everything is so available to people, and so just putting all that into context played a huge part in me really picking the midwifery route as opposed to obstetrics. That's something that I think really empowered and made me feel very confident in that decision. And so I knew early on that I had fear, but how did I want to deal with that fear, right? And I think that was a process to kind of figure out. And it didn't happen overnight. Divya, I don't know if Nitin mentioned it to you, but we've been together for about 20 years now, married for 13. this March. And we've gone through our own journey of kind of coming to this, place. But we also had to figure out a lot about ourselves before we entered, into becoming parents. And so there's a lot of therapy, inner work, self-discovery. That's sort of really the basis of all of this. That I feel, I really feel quite grateful that we were able to go on that journey prior to conception in the first place. So we could come at a more, we could come to a place where I could explore my options as a woman and take him along with me on that journey. If he wanted to participate and be a birth partner, right? So I asked him if he wanted to be, there at birth. And he said, well, why wouldn't I? I mean, of course, if I'm given the option, of course. And I said, look, birth trauma to the birthing partner is a fact. It exists. It can only happen if you fully understand the dynamic of what it would take for you to be there. The part you will play is just holding space. And sometimes men want to fix problems, and there's nothing you can do to fix any problem that might arise during birth. And so just being fully aware of that level of what's the word? Letting go, but yet self-assured, right?
Surrender.
Yes. Yes, that's surrendering. Coming to birth like that and showing up for your partner in that capacity is then you being fully aware of what you're trying to get into, right? Because the outcomes could be many. And of course, everyone hopes for a very, very positive outcome, but the outcomes could be many. And it's just knowing that and being approaching it from a very, very self-aware state was important. So, just really, I also look, I'm a very autonomous person. And through my research and the books I read, one of the very first books I read was Rachel Reed's Reclaiming Childbirth as a Rite of Passage, which I found so incredibly profound in the way that it was written. That by the end of that audiobook, I felt like there's much more that I need to uncover.
About yourself, about you as a woman.
So really, I think the two questions were, where do you feel private? Most private. And where do you feel the most safe? Because those are the places where your hormones are going to do what you need it to do for birth in the, without any disruptions, right? And so for me, that just ended up being in my bedroom at home. Now, for someone else, it could be, it could be elsewhere in a birth center or, somewhere else, right? So I think my research pointed me to these two questions, and very deeply, understanding who you are as a person is very important to come to this at a place where you're fully informed.
I would really like to commend all the work that you'd put in before, or during the start of this journey, because it speaks for itself. How you describe obstetrics, how you hinted at it, and how you described, when you were talking about exploring the different options that are there and the outcomes. While that is something I'd keep for some other day, the outcomes, because that is something that drives everyone crazy. What if something happens which is so rare? But of course, like I said, we'd keep it for some other day. But obstetrics, you spoke about obstetrics as a system than one doctor or one person that you would see, and that one person could have been better than the others, could have been birth supportive, if I would say. Why did you speak of obstetrics the way you did? What do you know about obstetrics as a system?
I think as a system, it just seemed extremely driven by logic and protocol, and is basically a summary of the worst. Catering to the worst case scenario rather than the best case scenario. And to me, I felt absolutely fine in my body, right? I didn't, even through pregnancy, after conception, I knew that I wanted to use as less intervention as possible from the get-go. And so the only scan I did was the 21-week anatomy scan.
Yeah.
Yes. Which also gives you sort of your look. I was 38 when I conceived Ida, and so for me, I really wanted to know, sort of, were there any chromosomal abnormalities? And then it just happened that everything was fine, and from then on, there were no tests that I wanted to take. Not even they had the gestational diabetes, the sugar test in the end, which was offered to me.
Which is horrible. And
I just refused to do that because I had a little blood sugar monitor at home that I can do a prick test and find out what I'm at. And the lovely thing about having these things at home is that, and this was something that my midwife actually asked me, to kind of explore. And as I explored it, I found that basically you can tweak things in your diet overnight. In about 3 or 4 days, you'll see the sugar levels drop and you'll see the blood pressure come to a place where you need it to be. And everything is fine.
Yeah.
And so I never once felt the need to actually consult an OB or take so-called, I know people study very, very hard to get their medical degrees, but I think when it comes to birth, we have to listen more to the person that's in that position, which is the pregnant person, and their voice. Because if they're feeling fine, we must absolutely trust that they are feeling fine. And if they're not feeling fine, then we must explore, but have them lead the exploration rather than, maybe a protocol or two that you want to run, right? And so that is kind of what I meant by obstetrics is planning for the worst case scenario versus actually it's not the best case. There could be a ton more of a range in between where everything's completely normal and you don't really need to intervene in any which ways.
Yeah. I love that. And the reason that I brought that out is we do talk about home births a lot on the podcast. And I do have moms now who've gone to the hospital and had a different experience. And I'm trying to gather that as well.
Yeah.
So people see the difference and not go in hope that they would get lucky with an OBGYN.
Yeah.
And I absolutely align with you, Ariel, here. Obstetrics came in to treat emergencies in birth. That's an entire science that will look at you as a woman with a faulty pregnancy and an emergency waiting to happen, or something bad is going to happen. And they've only been taught about birth. How do they fix birth? How do they fix the woman that has come to them?
Yeah.
So it's a predisposition of their practice, their ideas. And why would I want to put myself in a position when I'm absolutely healthy, like you said? When I do need them, there's a place for them, and that's not for normal births. That's not for low-risk moms. That's not for non-emergency scenarios. And slowly it's coming around. And I know it's hard when you base your entire identity with your studies. If I kind of today somebody tells me a traditional midwife is nothing, I'd be, anyway, I'm not going to be jostled at all because I've seen what I've seen. But at the same time, your identity is in question because you've given your heart and life to a science that takes so many years of your life before you become a doctor. But at the same time, it has a very different place. It doesn't have a place for every mother that goes there. And that's the sad part. Birth should go back to the community, should go back to community midwives.
Yeah. And the power truly stays in the person that's giving birth.
Absolutely.
Regardless of how many degrees somebody might have, right? Because
200%.
they are truly the keeper of their truths, at least for that pregnancy. Because you see, even the same woman, this is something I ended up learning, even the same woman can have completely different outcomes for multiple different births, right? And so it's such a unique experience that we can't have sort of a, broad brush stroke approach for every pregnant person. And so that was also, that bled into my fear of, actually I felt less in control of the outcomes if I had, if I'd sort of gone into sort of the medical side of things, right? And potentially maybe given up some of my instincts to listen to myself and make decisions based on that.
Yeah. And the driving force for birth, that is your intuition. That's basically your autonomy that drives birth. And if that is given up, the entire process kind of flips upside down.
Yes.
And you got to be very lucky to be able to birth the way you want in a hospital. But at the same time, I mean, like you said in the very beginning, to keep space for everyone, those who do feel safe in the hospital, it's birth happens in the mind. They are not suitable for home births. It's gonna then flip for them at home. It's where you feel safe. That's where it begins.
Yeah, you've got to answer those two questions for yourself, right? And really blank out all of the voices. That includes family, husbands, everyone, right? This is a self-exploration. And that is a huge, huge realization. I found that so deeply empowering. To come in with that knowledge, it just put me at a place where I felt like, look, I've done everything. And then there comes a time where you can do no more. And that's when birth happens.
Lovely. I kind of love that. So how did you decide on Hope as your midwife? How did you find her out?
Hope. So I spoke to quite a few individuals in the local community who are midwives, who are sort of, have been in this community for quite some time. And I really wanted to pick somebody who's part of my birth team who really resonated with my values of freedom and, the expression of body autonomy and, somebody who really, really was, I don't know, I suppose maybe also that person who was meant to be at Ira's birth, right? I don't know if I was looking for them, but they had to show up at some point, right? So I had some conversations with quite a few people who were all midwives, whether they were at birth centers or otherwise. And then I met Hope. Our first phone conversation, I knew it was her. And I was like, absolutely, I think she's going to be the person that that I will definitely feel embraced at a time in my life that, I'll be encountering the portal of birth for the first time. Maybe for the second time around, it might be a different experience. But, for the first time, it just mattered to me that I found somebody who I felt warm and fuzzy about. And that happened with Hope. And it was through sort of speaking with multiple people and really researching and finding people through Google as well and making phone calls and asking them questions about their approach, right? For instance, what do you ask your midwife? And I had to basically even research that because I had no idea. What do you ask your midwife? What's your transfer rate, back to hospitals, and what was your, talk to me about your successes and how would you deal with something where, you have to make a difficult decision, would you take, would you basically consult my partner or, how do you go about, what's your approach? Talk to me about all of this, right? And it's really important to have that conversation. And then also exploring their own boundaries as healthcare workers, about you may be very, very autonomous and brave, but what are the risks they're willing to take, right? And this is a very, very important one. What happens if I go beyond, like in the state of California, if you go beyond the 42nd week, then you can't, a midwife, technically, a home birth midwife, can't be at your birth. And so that's a legality, right? And so you need to find out what they're comfortable with and what they're not. In terms of tests, many people feel they're comfortable with, to go along with you on the journey as long as you do a certain amount of tests, because you're giving them, the confidence that they actually want to take you on as a person who's low risk or high risk. What if I reach at 37 weeks? What do we do then? So all of these questions came up in my research, and it was great to ask her these things and ask many people these things and find out what their approach is. And again, it just helps you really pick the right person for you, right? It's a matter of how much of your care do you want to entrust to the other person, but at the same time, how much of your own care do you want to keep,
reserve?
You want to reserve for yourself, right? And are they okay with that? Right? Like, I absolutely didn't want to be transferred unless there was sort of a real life risk threat to me or the baby. Otherwise, I just wanted to remain at home. And sometimes birth can take a week, I mean, you can start labor and, things can progress and stop and slow, and there could be something, I think it's called prodromal labor, where you just, experience.
Go on for days.
Go on for days. And then, so it's exploring all of these things, right? That's how I sort of came across Hope, really, by talking to people and exploring my options, but also coming to them with a lot of already researched information that I knew to ask them.
Yeah, that really helps the midwife also, because now she doesn't have to dig deeper to figure out what your requirements are, because that's also something one has to figure out, because I want to align with you as your birth team. And it hasn't, it shouldn't be overpowering to you. It should be somebody serving you. And we come from a place of serving you, not overpowering you in your birth space, because you're leading as a mom, because you're the one who's carrying a new life. You're the one who's the bearer of this process. And I want to add to that, because this is very important, very crucial what you brought up. There are two types of midwives. There are licensed midwives, and they can be actually good. I do not go with the dogma. I do not want to bring any dogma on this podcast that one person is, just because they've been trained a certain way, they haven't transformed themselves over the years. They might actually do practice very ethically, very traditionally too. And again, what suits you. Some moms might need medical intervention, and they might ask for it. So for them, someone else has a place. For somebody who's autonomous like you might want someone who works a certain way. So interviewing. And there are traditional midwives who are not bound by any license. They do not take a license. They do not go under any protocol. And sometimes some registered midwives do go that route, that after a point in time, they're like, well, I want to support this mom if she goes beyond 42 weeks. I want to just sit with her. And I don't want anybody telling me what to do when I know what's right, when I know what suits my mom. So many midwives go that route. So knowing that there are options for you out there, and there are different kind of people who can support you in your calling, that's power right at the beginning, which doesn't feel like it, but later you realize all of it just comes together beautifully.
It does. It does. That's such an important aspect, is that you check for boundaries, right? You check for yours and theirs and what they feel comfortable about. And And it's really getting to know that person too at a very, very deeper level. You're inviting somebody into your space during a time when you're the most vulnerable. And so it needs deep thought, and deep research and finding the right person. And it wasn't hard at all, Divya. If you're looking for someone, you will find them.
Yeah,
is all I'll say to people.
I agree with you. It comes around, and that's where magic lies. And so for anybody who doesn't know that you can manifest things as a woman, you have that power far more than men. And I go on record to say that men do have that power too, but women are far more intuitive because they're going to bring new life. They're a part of the evolution in a more intertwined way. Somebody that is working with evolution. Women have that intuition, which kind of keeps you at the place of manifestation. You don't have to learn anything. Just sit there, manifest, and see things work out for you.
It's a beautiful thing you've said. Takes me back to all of the work that I did after I learned I was pregnant. Was I followed the moon cycles, and the moon goes through cycles of being full moon and new moon. And so I did a ton of mental work, and with that came meditation, and with that came sort of full moon meditations and new moon meditations, and they were all about purging and manifesting. So purging during full moons and manifesting during new moons. And so much of that guided meditation that I did during that time was so powerful, Divya, to let go of all of the fears that I had, right? To come to a place where, okay, where is this coming from? Write it down, journal. I did a bunch of journaling because I wouldn't remember, the steps that I took if I didn't record it somewhere, right? And so I wanted to kind of really took that year to pretty much slow down, even at work, and really go inward rather than go outward. From the moment that I learned I was pregnant, didn't want to immediately share it with anyone, so I kept the news to myself for the first. I think for the first 2 weeks or so, I didn't even tell Nitin because it was I just wanted to guard the information for myself and feel, process it, feel it, right? Yeah. And then I shared it with Nitin, and then we waited until I was 6 months until we shared it with our parents, even because our parents also feel the social pressure to share with, their siblings and their loved ones. And, all of a sudden everybody knows, right? And so the other thing is to sort of mentally, psychologically protect my bubble. I just felt that I wanted to kind of delay sharing news, and the delaying happened such that it got delayed by 6 months into me and being, pregnant, and then having to share at sort of probably the 6.5, 7th month time. And even when we shared news, we didn't share our due dates. We literally just, shared the fact that here's what, we're having a baby, and it's, around about, 4 weeks from the time that we were actually due, because we wanted all of this pressure to be taken away. It's a time to actually not be outward. It's a time to go inward. And I was getting a call to do that more. And you talk about manifestation was so beautiful. But the second part of that, actually the first part of that, is you got to purge all of the things, your experiences, your emotions as a human being, your however number of years you've been on the planet, all of those things that have happened, have accumulated over time, right? There's obviously therapy, but there's also other things that you can, journal and really bring your thoughts to the surface and process it, take the time to kind of process and digest it and set it aside, right? And that's the other big part of birth prep that sometimes gets overlooked, because not everything is about physical prep. And physical prep can only get you that far.
Yeah.
Because by the end of the day, when you're in the recesses of birth, and you're 26 hours in labor, the only thing that takes you forward is the fact that you've done this level of deep work on yourself, that you truly trust in your body, in yourself, that everything will be just fine and that you will see yourself at the end of this tunnel, right?
Yeah.
And that conviction comes from that space.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the process also is designed to bring all the leftover fear right in front of us so that we further jump that last kind of hurdle, impediment, and then enter motherhood. So,
yes. So there's that period called transition where you doubt yourself so much. I want to specifically talk about this because that happened to me at 35 hours. Because overall, my labor was close to about touching 40 hours. And I think there was a time where I just felt like, look, I think I'm done with this. Okay, let me just, I'm done. Is there a way I could go to the nearest hospital and get a C-section now because I am done? And I remember asking my midwife this, and she was like, be silly, you're 10 centimeters dilated. They're going to ask you to, well, we can take you there, but they're going to ask you to push, and it's going to be an assisted push until baby's out. And I was like, oh my God, this seems like a hopeless situation and then I looked at her another 5 minutes later and I'm like, Hope, just tell me what time the baby is going to come. Just someone tell me when is birth going to happen, right? Anyways, I laugh about it now, but I was really in quite a state. And I remember Hope, she just hugged me, Divya, and she said, I'm so sorry. I just wish there was an easier way. I wish I could tell you there was one. But there just isn't. And you are doing fantastically well. Just breathe and stay here in the moment, right? And I think it's that from one contraction to the next contraction. I also have to talk about my birth doula, who's also Hope's midwifery assistant, Melanie Doon, who was just such a great support. She was there at the birth too. By the way, Hope and Melanie have had, Hope's had 4 children, and Melanie has had 3 of her own, 3 home births. And so they had very, very grounded perspectives in terms of questions, right? Like a perspective turned into a question. And when they would ask me a question between a contraction, I would find myself going into a deep abyss to find the answer to it. And by the time I approached the next contraction, I felt much better, right? And so they just had this grounding effect on me. And you're right, the transition, 35th hour, or whenever that happens to people, it happens to every woman, comes a lot of self-doubt. The fact that you're not going to be able to do one more contraction or one more, hour of this. And so I think you really need to dig deep within yourself and feel absolutely comfortable with, I say comfortable with the discomfort. It's actually an oxymoron, but you really need to lean into the discomfort.
Yeah.
And breathe.
Yeah. That's yoga. So when you began with it's not a physical body experience, and no matter how much you prep yourself physically, your mind is going to be something that has to take you to the shore, because you're riding the waves. You're really not doing anything. You're just riding waves that have their own speed, volume, height, and they change on their own. Intensity, everything. So I teach prenatal yoga, and the first thing I tell them, yoga is not going to, the yoga that you understand is not going to help you have a normal birth. I'm sorry. I begin there. So don't hope that all the asanas you're going to do in here is going to prep your body, because your body is not lacking anywhere. Let's not begin with that state of deficiency that you need to prep your body, because women that are having C-sections are having C-sections because their body was not strong enough. No, women are strong. Women are strong. Yes. Even if they haven't exercised one day, I'd say that. Women are strong.
Of course. Look, I did very minimal exercise. I'm 38. I literally walked every day. That's all I did. And I probably did a little bit of yoga here and there when I felt like it. And then, and I can tell you of many other people's stories that I listened to during my own pregnancy. And it's just one aspect of it. Because you do feel your aches and pains as a pregnant person. Yeah. And it's to alleviate some of those sort of discomforts that you're feeling, that you can actually help yourself, too. Yeah. But I think it's just such a mental game, Divya. It really was, In the end, that's what it boils down to. And deeply, you have to know yourself, to know what your boundaries are. And look, what you said you were capable, and I thought of this last night, what you say you're capable of before you give birth, let me tell you, that is not the ceiling. Because after you give birth, what you think you're capable of, well, that's something completely different.
Yeah. So sitting with discomfort, what you highlighted, that's yoga. You don't have to exercise. You have to learn to sit and breathe with discomfort. And that's yoga. If that is the yoga that you'll do during labor and birth, you'll do it during labor and birth. Just let labor and birth make you a yogi.
Make you a yogi. Yeah. I think just knowing that, right? Because a lot of the times when we go to birth classes, our expectation is, oh my God, what if I get into this position? Will it be easier? What if I, what if I did these number of squats? Would it, when you're in labor, all of that logic, because you're not even beyond a point, you're not even accessing your logical part of the mind.
You are not.
Or your brain.
That becomes dormant.
You've basically, you've gone into your, your primal state, which is your amygdala, is basically that's driving the whole process. And so for me, understanding that through birth education, and specifically catered to physiologic birth, Divya, because there's birth education of multiple kinds, I cannot stress enough that there are multiple choices even there, that people need to be very, very informed to make the right decision, to actually pick something that first of all sets the foundation for physiologic birth, and then you explore options, right? To me, knowing that I need to have the right hormones flowing in my body, and for that, my thoughts hold the key to the right hormones flowing in my body, was like a light bulb. Because knowing that, just that alone put me in a completely different place at birth, right? Like otherwise it's like you're in the dark. You don't know, you haven't done this.
Yeah.
And here you can be in the dark. You're still in the dark, but you actually know the layout of the room. so you know where to kind of walk in the dark.
You're still walking the tunnel, and there's going to be light, which you can't see yet, and there's going to be light at the end of the tunnel. But you're right, at least enter the right tunnel.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's beautiful. And thank you for bringing that up. Again, another very important point. childbirth classes, take childbirth classes from independent educators, not aligned with any hospitals, because you'll only be learning, and a 2-day class will do you nothing.
Yeah,
A 2-day,
you learn
3-day
about their
class.
processes, procedures, you know.
Yeah.
I think I attended one of those as well. So I did a variety of things. And then I ended up attending something online, which was incredible because it's called Built to Birth. And, the content that they put together about physiologic birth was incredible. It was something I could basically ask Nitin if he was interested to kind of join me along. And he found the whole science behind the hormones and, all of that fascinating, right? It was such it was so empowering to actually know that before getting into it, because then where you're going to, what options to choose from, right? Because it's not just to say, hey, I want to do an unmedicated birth. Like, what are the implications of all of that, right? And if you were to use any form of pharmacological painkillers, what might be the implications of that? Just understanding what the statistics are and where they stand, I think everybody's entitled to, sort of painkillers and sort of really, a medicated birth as much as they are entitled to an unmedicated birth, if it is an option that you want to choose. But just know then how it can change your outcomes, because it's, that's sort of where I learned about the cascade of interventions,
Yes.
And
Does more harm than good.
Yeah. And the first intervention is you actually, even without realizing, you sitting in the car to get to the hospital is your first intervention, because it changes the narrative of everything in your mind. And then you're starting to secrete more cortisol through your body, which is actually counterproductive to labor and labor progressing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you actually reach there. And so just knowing that story, or series of events, how it may unfold was super powerful to us.
Yeah. For the listeners, cortisol is the stress hormone. So it's like if, for example, Ariel sees me at her birth. She hasn't met me ever. She doesn't know me. All of a sudden, her blood pressure will change. All of a sudden, her heart tone will change, because she will not feel safe with me because she doesn't know me. I'm a stranger. The moment you sit in the car and go to the hospital, you're seeing a lot of strangers and the fear goes up. And for an animal in the wild, if the fear goes up, the defense mechanism says that slow down labor so I can find a safe place again, so I'm free from predators who might be harmful for my baby and my birth process. That's a defense mechanism. And it's there for good. So the first intervention, sitting in the car, going to watch the people of strangers, like the face of the strangers, and being in the hands of the strangers who will dictate what you are feeling, where you're at, what centimeters you're dilated at, which means nothing for your birth, is counterproductive to the process.
And giving you all this work in a part of your brain that basically is switched off for birth, which is constantly people are asking you questions. If you reach the hospital, they'll ask you questions. They'll ask you how you're feeling. They'll check you. And then the formality of filling the paperwork and the rest of it. And then you're constantly being drawn to engage with a part of your brain, which is basically, again, not required, right? And so I think understanding all of that was really empowering, again, further affirming the choice that I had made to kind of stay home. And it was the care I received, Divya, I must say, I'm so truly grateful for it. But I was so amazed. I think it was nothing like I'd ever expected. It was such a liberating experience. At the very start of my pregnancy, I sat down and thought about how I wanted birth to go. And I had no answers, right? And then I did a bunch of research, went through, read a lot of audiobooks and listened to your podcast, listened to Birth Instincts by, Midwife and Dr. Stu. Yes. And then I did, reach a point where I just felt like, I was far more empowered to kind of make the right choice in terms of my options, right? And I think that I just felt, one thing led to another. The opposite is also the true, right? Had I not done all of this research and left it in the hands of my OB, one thing would have led to another. And would that be the thing, that would have given me a different outcome, right? And so
that you wanted.
So I didn't know the answer to it, but then right about the 6-month mark, I drew up a vision board for myself and set a vision for how I wanted birth to go. And this time around, I knew the answer after the research of how I wanted it to go. And then I said, okay, let me put nice pictures and create a vision board, for myself for birth, right? And all of the pictures that came were pictures of, women sitting in the birth pool or, surrounded by people that they actually want as part of their birth team and feel safe and secure around. A lot of smiles rather than a lot of, tears, but some tears, but really, not to the level of intensity that, again, you probably see in media or movies, more realistic forms or pictures, right? So as I drew that up and I asked myself, what's my goal? One thing really stuck out. My goal for my birth was that I wanted to come out of my birth feeling empowered and listened to. So this is what I wrote in my journal. And in retrospect, now looking back, I've come out of birth. How do I feel? I feel empowered, and I definitely felt listened to. And I cannot thank the team that I had to have provided me that level of service. And I think that I just truly felt treated with such respect as a human being and with such connection as a woman that if I were to have baby number 2, I would do it all over again. I would do the same things all over again.
Yes, I like that. That's the last question that I usually ask. What if you had to go over the entire experience again? What would you do? And I've not had one mother that ever said, no, I'm not going to do it. They all, and the beauty about home births is right after they've had the baby, let's say, and this has been experienced with 2 of my moms who said, oh, the next time I'm going to have my baby, I'm going to have you. And I was like, okay,
absolutely.
It's just, you've just given birth. And because it's not suffering, they felt the beauty of it all. They're feeling empowered. They're feeling powerful. A reliance on their body far more, a trust on their body far more than ever. If I could do this, I could do anything in this world. And
I can do anything. That's how I felt. A sense of huge relief right after baby was born. Breastfeeding got up to a great start, thanks to Hope, who, put baby skin to skin right away. And then she came around and said, do you want to hold her like this? And, I close her to the nipple, and then she just latched on right away. And then 25 minutes later, the placenta was out. And then they did a placenta tour. They call it the tree of life, she said. These are her words. I don't know, just remembering all that makes me emotional now. But it's, just sitting on your bed and reviewing, your placenta and, a tiny baby who's making all kinds of faces because she's actually looking for the amniotic fluid, which is missing. And she's like, what is all this? Like, there's lights and all kinds of things. And just being in that moment, right? I think they call it the golden hour. But for us, it was more than the golden hour. It was 3 hours as they started cleanup and, post birth checks and the rest of it. I did have a second degree tear, but it wasn't as bad at all. And again, look at the beauty of this. Hope took a look at it and she was like, you know what? I think just if I just put a stitch in, it should be okay. And then I looked at her and I said, look, I have a fear of needles. Do you think it's really needed? And then she looked at me and she said, can you promise me that you'll just not go downstairs for like 10, 15 days? Because my bedroom is upstairs. And she was like, anyways, Nitin's going to make sure that everything comes up to you here. But you're just going to live in the room, and follow the 15 days in the bed, on the bed, around the bed, which is 15 days of 5 days each of you doing that. So I looked at her and I said, yeah, I think definitely I'll be able to manage that. I'm not going to go anywhere. And she was like, take it easy.
Yeah.
But if you promise me that, then I won't. But I will come every day and check up on you. And she did. She came for the next whole week, the next 10 days. Both Melanie and her came and checked up on me, not just physically, but my mental state, right? Her appointments are an hour and a half. It was like having a friend beyond a friend, Divya. Like having a
mother, sister.
Yeah, like a feminine, energy, like somebody who's like your feminine savior angel come and check up on you like that and treat you like you're the most important person. I just felt like incredibly grateful to have received that level of care, that's how I felt. I felt like I was on top of the world.
I'd like you to elaborate on the prenatals, how they look like, what were the checks, etc. But I think we would wrap it up right now. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm incredibly grateful to have you here on the podcast and share the insights that you have, which is incredible. And I'm sure women are going to really, really benefit out of it. Yeah. And we will continue in part 2 of this further. We'll dig deeper into your birth experience and the antenatals with Hope and your team.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Divya, for spending so much time with me. I hope this message is useful. I'm sure it will be.
I have a very good feeling about it. And like we've been speaking, feelings tell us a lot.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. We'll connect again.
There is a field beyond fear, where the body is empowered to take on labor and birth. To land there, it is crucial to take birth education. To enroll into our unique labor and birth preparation course, reach out to us at www.birthagni.com or scroll through all available prenatal and postnatal preparation classes. Thank you for listening, all in the spirit of birth, womanhood and freedom. Remember, you got the power. This podcast is about physiological birth and does not offer or claim to provide medical knowledge or diagnosis.